Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Football House. I'm Sam Basil, joined alongside Will Tondo, Cole Hughes, and Jake Zimmer, and we're here ready to break down everything from week 2 of the college football season and then predict everything that we think you should watch for week 3 of the 2024 college football season. Gentlemen, this past week was pretty wild. We're going to go into, a lot of detail with some of the results in a little bit. But first off, um, you know, if we're not Cole, I feel like this week was pretty great. Um, we expect the first 2 weeks of any college football season to be a little bit lackluster. There's a lot of spreads in the double digits, as up to 35 points. There's even some this week that are still pretty high. A lot of teams are in the weak portion of their schedules. But no matter what, I think we were still able to see some pretty, interesting results, some pretty season defining results, depending on, if you're a group of 5 team, where you're looking to go in this year's college football playoff. So for you guys, going around the horn a little bit, anything that really caught your eye this past weekend?
I mean, is how, and this will be a topic, I'm sure, but how does Notre Dame come back from this? I feel like, Basil, a couple weeks ago, you mentioned on the stream, it was, Notre Dame has the benefit of being in that top 10, that upper echelon, that upper tier. We're talking about LSU and Michigan and the, poking outside the top 10 versus a team like Notre Dame, who all they had to do was string together a couple nice wins. You can afford a pretty crappy loss to a good team down the stretch, and you're in fine shape. You're still going to make it. Now they got a lot of work to do for me. Like, you have to win out pretty convincingly, in my opinion. But I'm curious to see how the group feels about that.
Yeah, Notre Dame was like, when this expanded playoffs came up, it's like the perfect position for Notre Dame, where it's always like, oh, they should finally join a conference. They should. No, because it's like, if they just beat Notre Dame, they're a 5 or 6 seed. And then it's like, you don't have to face up against one of the big dogs right off the bat. But now against like NIU, you get that loss, and it's like, I know it's week 2, but it's like, I mean,
it feels pretty damning. It just feels like they're cooked.
Like, I don't see you in the playoffs. Sorry, Cole.
Yeah, I mean, they disappoint every year. It's just a matter of when. So they started pretty early this year. Lucky the Irish.
Well, we struck a chord. Sorry, Cole.
I
didn't want me to come out and slander you so quick.
It's I can't even be upset. It's just embarrassing at this point. I mean, the fact that you pay a school $1.4 million to play you, and then they come in and they beat you, that's just sad. The fact that you can't score more than 14 points at home, that's sad. So, I mean, look, they are what they are. And like you guys are saying, I mean, how do they bounce back from this? They pretty much are going to have to win out at this point if they want a playoff spot, because like you guys said, there's no conference championship for them to play in. And, there's a lot of good teams around college football, more than the 12 that they have spots allotted for in the college football playoff. So I wouldn't say that they're in Florida State territory quite yet, Notre Dame, but really bad loss, and they really need to have a bounce back week this week against Purdue.
Yeah, Cole, you bring up a great point in that the fact that Notre Dame they do not have a conference championship to, kind of possibly save their chances at a college football playoff. Look, like you said, I don't think they're out. I don't think they're completely out of the mix. I think, if anything, Northern Illinois is more in the mix than Notre Dame is out, as we'll get into in a little bit with some of the other group of 5 teams. But the fact that Notre Dame does not have a conference championship game to play in this season, or any other season really, it hurts them, especially in a time where winning the conference championship now has such a huge impact on your college football playoff seeding. So my question to you, Cole, is do we feel like Notre Dame's independence in the college football landscape and, FBS independence in general, do we feel like this 12-team playoff format is putting a clock on the concept of FBS independence?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think Notre Dame, I've said this for years on the show. I think they just should have joined a conference a long time ago. I think it's hurt them even before they altered the playoff system. And I think even now it's going to hurt them even more just because, like you said, there are advantages to playing within a conference. And if you win that conference, you pretty much would get a bye if you're Notre Dame because they're going to be in one of the top conferences if they do join one, right? They're not going to be part of the group of five. So I think it could only help them. The only thing is, I mean, like you go into a conference like the Big Ten or the ACC and, recruiting, that becomes a factor too now. And that's a whole thing, NIL and all that with conference affiliation. And there's a lot of, complicated aspects to it. But I do think that they ultimately need to join a conference. Like we've said, they're not done yet, but it doesn't help their case. I mean, I don't think they're going to be – I think coming into the season, they could have potentially been that fifth spot in the rankings of the college football playoff. But now, I mean, if they get in, they're probably going to be in the lower half of that, and they may not have a home game the first game of the season just because of this loss. So it's going to impact them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if we can look at our football house top 25 from this past weekend, Notre Dame definitely fell, along with a few other schools. A couple schools fell because of losses. I mean, Notre Dame, Michigan, and then a couple schools fell. They got the win, but I mean, it just was not as much as a dominant win as we would have liked to have seen. Those schools in question obviously are Oregon and Penn State. Oregon, obviously, a shaky 3-point win against Boise State, and then Penn State almost, they had to, as a top 10 school in the country, had to get a comeback win in the second half against Bowling Green out of the MAC. So looking at this, our football house top 25, a couple notable differences. Boston College, not ranked. They got some votes. They're ranked in the AP poll. NIU, none of us gave them a single vote, and they are also in the AP top 25. Any thoughts on, how our top 25 compares to last week and how it compares to this week's AP and coaches top 25?
Listen, great win for NIU, and I'm not trying to just hammer it on. Like, I do want Notre Dame to do well. I don't think they're in top 25 territory yet. Like, it's a winning field goal. You win by a touchdown or two, okay, you can sneak into that 25 spot. I'm disappointed that we could not get Boston College up here. I'm full-fledged ready to go to war for Boston College. I think Bill O'Brien is finally coaching at his weight class, and this is where he is meant to be. And I think this week is going to showcase that. But hand up, I watched the whole Oregon Boise State match as well. But hand up, I did put in my poll to have right before the game ended because I thought Boise State was going to win.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think Oregon is a little high on our poll. I just think the team – there's some teams behind them that probably should be ahead of them and that are ahead of them in the AP poll. So, Tennessee, I think even Miami could be ahead of them potentially. But Penn State, like you said, just looking at this last week, there's teams within the top 25 that I think, or that were in the top 25 heading into week 2 that, either showed that they're asserting their dominance or that there are teams that you might have to start worrying about. So, breaking it down, teams that could be on the worrying scale. Penn State, obviously, with their close matchup to Bowling Green. Kansas lost to Iowa. They're off our top 25 now. That's not a good sign. Iowa not being able to win at home against Iowa State. Utah, they won against Baylor, and they were on my card last week. I had the over. They were rolling in the first quarter. They put up 17 points like that, and then Cam Rising gets hurt again, which has been a constant issue over the last couple of years for him. So is he going to be out for an extended period of time? If he's not out, how does he perform with that injury. So I think Utah is another team to keep an eye on out for, and see how they perform. And then on the flip side, you have teams that just continue to dominate. I mean, Miami, Missouri, Tennessee, Ole Miss. All these teams are. I mean, granted, some of them played again no-name teams, but just the amount of points they're putting up and how their offenses look, they're going to be dangerous going forward. Louisville, another team. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. There's still a lot of change to happen within this top 25. I am surprised that we have Washington that slipped in at 25. I would have put Nebraska in over them, getting the big win over Colorado. Obviously, Washington had a great year last year, made it to the national championship, but so far they haven't really played anyone. I think they beat Weber State and Eastern Michigan. So I don't know if they've gotten anything like good wins to get there, but time will tell.
You said something interesting, Cole, which is I think something we're going to need to keep an eye on, like in the next couple seasons. There is, and it's very prevalent in college basketball, where it's like, you have these bye games, these Power 5 programs playing shitty, not shitty, but like lower tier colleges. There is no benefit for these teams to play them anymore, because like unless you're winning 70-0, like we talk about Penn State and Bowling Green, it's like that was not great for them. Yeah, they won, but everyone's like, oh, Penn State's not that team. And then again, of course, if you lose, you paid money to lose and then get knocked down in the rankings even further. Like you need to beat these teams by 70-0. And even at that point, it's like, oh, well, you just beat up on your little brother, so like it doesn't count.
It's like college basketball. It's the same debate in college basketball, and I wonder if it's going to get there in college football, where your ranking will actually slip because you don't kick those people's ass, right? Like you see that in the net rankings now, that all these college basketball teams are making their schedules specifically to get into the tournament, and we've seen the committee the past 2 years has said, we don't really care about these close games against good teams. You need to kick people's ass. So I wonder if that's kind of the same strategy here now. It's like maybe everyone's just going to start scheduling more of these guarantee games. And I'm sure the lower tier, FBS and FCS schools will love it because, hey, we get to put a couple $1 million in our pocket. That funds Bryant's new, whatever their press box or whatever the fuck they're building. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll see that more.
I mean, again, it's like USC and LSU. It's like week 1 matchup, 2 top 10 teams. It's like win or loss, you're still like, damn, like you put up a fight, right? It's like that's like you're facing someone out of conference in a challenging situation. You can find some good out of it, but if like LSU loses to like Lafayette Tech, you're like in the week 1, you're like, or even like only scores 14, for example, Notre Dame and NIU, you're like, oh shit, kind of a bummer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually think that the conclusion to draw from that in terms of, scheduling quality opponents has 2 different answers. I think they have an answer for the power conferences, and then I think they have an answer for the group of 5 conferences, which I think gets into our next graphic, which is the group of 5 bubble, right? Obviously now, there's a 12-team playoff. There's 1 guaranteed group of 5 spot. I think at some point in time, there will be a playoff field where we will see 2 group of 5 teams make it to the playoffs. 1 guaranteed conference champ and then 1 at-large bid, or, just a second conference champ. Right now, though, especially with how strong the Big Ten and the SEC are, that is not the case. So this year, at least, the best group of 5 conference champ is going to be the sole representative in the playoff. But like you guys are saying, in terms of, scheduling teams to make sure that you're guaranteed a win, like we see with Boise State, which is one of the teams that I have on my group of 5 bubble as of this week, a good loss is just as valuable to a group of 5 team as a 70-point win against an FCS team is to a Power 5 program. If that makes sense to you guys. So right now we've got my group of 5 bubble as of yesterday are Northern Illinois, Boise State, Memphis, and Liberty. Northern Illinois, I don't think would have been here without that win against Notre Dame, but because of the high quality and just the general quality of the MAC, I think right now they're probably the third best group of 5 conference. That helps them a little bit. That boosts them all the way up. Boise State and Memphis, I think, are the 2 top dogs in terms of an auto bid conversation because the American and the Mountain West have been 2 of the best group of 5 conferences these past couple of years. And then I've got Liberty. The drop off, in my opinion, between these first 3 teams and then Liberty is a little steep compared to the drop off between these 3 teams and the rest of our top 25. But I figured, 4 teams, it's important to include them. The biggest conclusion I drew from making this graphic earlier this week is that looking at the rest of these team schedules, they do not have a lot of quality opponents remaining. They have to make sure that they win the conference and make sure that the other teams in their conference get quality wins for the rest of the season. So I was just curious what you guys thought about these 4 teams and if there are any other, group of 5 programs that have caught your attention early on this season.
I think the biggest problem that is in Boise State's situation, because again, it was a hell of a game. I don't think Oregon right now is going to perform in the Big Ten, where it's like, they're going to see some losses that are going to dilute what this game means. Whereas like Notre Dame should win out, right? Like on paper, they should win out, where it's like that upset looks pretty great if that's their only loss and it's NIU. I don't see a world right now where Oregon wins out, where that loss is like, oh shit, Boise State could have been like the team that could have, knocked them off their tracks. So
yeah,
I think
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a huge difference on what Oregon does this year. I mean, if Oregon, falls apart, then that hurts Boise. But if they, start to get it together, because they have started off a little shaky, Oregon, based on coming in the year, the expectations were. But, if Oregon goes out and somehow they miraculously beat Ohio State and they're competing for the Big Ten championship, then I think Boise's fine, right? But I definitely agree with you, Basil. I mean, these top 3 teams here you have on the left, NIU, Boise State, Memphis, are definitely different. Liberty, I think, has the easiest schedule out of all of them, but Conference USA opponents, I mean, they're not playing anyone, right? So they could go undefeated, right, in the regular season, but is that going to be enough for them to get a bid into the top 12 teams in the college football playoff? With NIU, I mean, like Tondo was saying, big win against Notre Dame. But what do they do going forward? I mean, what if we haven't seen really any other, flashes from them to give us any reasoning that they're going to win the MAC, right? There's plenty of other good teams that are in the MAC, including Toledo, including Miami of Ohio. And Miami of Ohio is a team, they're starting out their schedule with Northwestern they lost to. They're playing Cincinnati this week, and then they have Notre Dame, right? So they could start 0-3 against non-conference teams, but then win out in the MAC and they win that conference, but they don't get in, right? So Memphis, same thing, great team, but you have Tulane and you have, I believe, UNLV or USF that are in that conference as well. So, I mean, there's still a lot to play out. I think Boise has the clearest path in the Mountain West if they win out. If their only one loss is a 3-point loss to Oregon, I think that they'll probably get that Power 5 spot.
Yeah. I mean, you say that Liberty has the easiest schedule remaining, and that might be true, but I don't think that bodes well for Liberty's playoff chances, right? I mean, in a sense, you'd almost rather be a 9-3 group of 5 team with 2 high quality losses, by, within a touchdown, than you'd have, a 12-0 season out of Conference USA. Again, we don't know that for sure because this is the first year of the 12-team college football playoff. But based on how things are shaking out right now, I think that might be the case. let's get into our, in terms of a 12-team playoff, let's get into, my prediction for a current playoff field as of Sunday morning. Again, conference champs, top 4 seeds do not change. The only thing I really had was that Miami moves up again ahead of Utah. So we've got Georgia, Ohio State, Miami, and Utah as the top 4 seeds. Memphis, I moved ahead of Boise State as the 12 seed, the group of 5 representative. And then a couple teams that I had moving out. Michigan, Notre Dame are out. Mizzou, I have in. USC, I have in. They have looked really impressive. But right now, anybody that you guys feel like could move into a top 4 seed, anybody that you feel like could, any at-large power 4 teams that you feel like could make a chance so far for the rest of the season?
I think, like Cole mentioned earlier, we had to keep an eye on Utah, Cam Rising's injury, and just if that has any impact. I think there's a match this week. What is it? Kansas State, Arizona. That could obviously be a big implicator into Utah's position. I mean, I would love Utah to be a top 4 team. I have a future on them, but we'll see how the cookie crumbles in week 3.
You got OK State too in the Big 12. That
OK State is another one
we're talking about.
That's another team as well. That Tennessee USC matchup in the first round would feed families. That'd be sick. That'd be a good game. I think Alabama, Oregon too would be awesome.
I think that the SEC is wide open. I mean, you have to put Georgia at 1 right now, and I think that's, the right thing to do. But look at all the SEC teams that are in that first round. You have Tennessee, Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, Missouri. So there's a lot of games to be played within the Southeast Conference. And, it's not guaranteed that Georgia is going to win the SEC championship. I mean, they might have a great year and make it to the SEC championship and then lose that game. And whoever wins that game would be getting that bye. So, Texas is really the team at this point that stands out to me that could probably give them the most competition in a SEC championship game. But, Ole Miss is not a team to overlook either, and neither is Alabama. Both of them, they're sitting at 4-5 right now. And I do think that it's going to be highly competitive in the SEC.
Speaking of SEC, I mean, don't rule out. I'm going to say something outrageous here. Don't rule out Missouri. Like, seriously, I really think, and we'll talk about this a bit later because they play Boston College, but I feel like they escaped the brunt of the SEC this year. They play Alabama, they play Oklahoma. Great. Those are 2 games that are going to be tough to win. But other than that, I mean, their schedule is not that bad, right? Like, if you take care of business and you somehow win one of those games, I mean, they could be sitting real pretty here. And then 11 maybe turns into 6 where Ole Miss is. I've been an Ole Miss hater, which I reneged on before. But yeah, I love the Tigers this year, man. We'll talk about that in the picks, but don't be surprised if Mizzou has a single-digit number. That's all I'm going to say.
Absolutely. Let's get into our picks.
I was going to say one last thing. I think there's only one team that can beat Georgia right now, and it's the Longhorns.
Yeah.
And if Georgia beats them in the SEC championship, I don't think it happens twice.
All right. So let's get into our picks this week. Taking a quick look at the standings. We're doing pretty solid. Jake, you had a little bit of a rough week last week. You're down to a 40%.
We're doing this again. It's just me and my fight to stay over the 500 line here.
Well, your problem this week, and you said it in your text. You're like, I'm just gonna spray the board. That's not a good approach when you're under 500.
No, I got to get back, right? I'm making quality picks, but
you can either get back or you can send yourself to a fucking abysmal spiral.
Dig the hole deeper, baby.
We had this debate do you recall around this time last year, we had this debate with Mike Gilligan, and that was his strategy, and I think he picked himself back up, but I don't know.
He was doing like first half spread covers. You're doing like fucking FIU. Like,
don't you worry. We're going to come back this week. Here was my struggle. I overvalued Georgia Tech last week. I way overvalued FAU, which we're going to talk about. They've crossed me bad, and I think they are. I'm declaring them this year's Texas A&M, where they have crossed us on this show, and I'm not going back. I'm an FAU hater.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then, I mean, I picked shame on me for Penn State beating Bowling Green by 5 touchdowns. Like, that's not outrageous at the time. You know, you think Penn State, they just steamroll West Virginia. Like, yeah, they're going to be right up there in the end again. And then they have a comeback win against Bowling Green. You kidding me?
Zimmer, I'm with you. I took Alabama minus 31 against USF. It was a 14-13 game going in the fourth quarter. And then they decided to put up 28 points in the fourth quarter, and they fucking won by 26. So it's just, you don't know what's going to happen. It's still early, but yeah.
And look, you look at this card, it's who would have taken the over on Iowa State, right?
No.
No. Exactly. I took the under there because it's rational. Oh, Iowa's playing. Let's take the under. But they had to fucking cross me too. It's unbelievable.
Well, you still got plenty of time to get yourself back in
being dramatic here
in the good graces of our pick'em standings. But let's get into our cards this week. Starting off with you, Tondo. You want to go through your regular picks and then your FCS pick, which seems like a surprise as of now, and then your lock of the week, and then hold off on your game of the week.
I'll have to go back and add the FCS lock, which gives me some time to think in my head. But the first one, I saw Zimmer put Kansas -7. First off, I don't disagree with you, Zim, but the problem is, how the fuck is it only a 7-point spread of a Big 12 team and UNLV? A 7-point spread, this is one of those moments I saw you put that, and I'm like, Vegas knows something, and there is just that's a weird spread. That is a weird spread.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why later on. But I do agree. It is very overwhelmingly small. I agree with you.
I feel like so many people are putting actual money on Kansas -7, which is why I'm taking UNLV. They had a decent fight against Houston. Kansas is actually not playing in their stadium. They're playing in a smaller environment, which kind of helps UNLV and hurts Kansas. And like I said, it just looks weird in my head, so I'm taking the cover. I like the Washington -4.5 versus Washington State. I think a lot of people had this on the card. Boston College +17. I do think Missouri is obviously the better team, but riding with some Bill O'Brien magic. Wisconsin +16 versus Alabama. They're back in Madison. I think just 2 touchdowns is very large. I don't know. It's not the best Wisconsin team, but it's also not the best Alabama team. So I do like covering the points there. South Carolina +7 versus LSU. I think this is one of those weeks where South Carolina proves that it is going to be in the conversation in the SEC as well. I'm not guaranteeing a win, but I just don't feel confident in LSU. And then I'm taking the over on the Utah State 44.5. just because both teams are putting up points respectively. I will say my lock, Texas -35 versus UTEP. Texas State just dropped 49 points against UTEP. I think Texas could win this game by 70. I truthfully do. And like I mentioned, I think they're just a very hot squad right now. My FCS lockup match, I guess I forgot to write it down. I'm going to take the over on Holy Cross and our Bryant University Bulldogs. It's homecoming week. It's alumni week. I think Holy Cross is going to steamroll Bryant. I can't believe I'm doing back-to-back Bryant picks in back-to-back weeks. But the fact that they only won by 3 points against a Division II team,
it was 4 points. Give him some credit.
Yeah, but I self-imposed a spread of 17.5.
I know. It was probably more, too. If the markets had said something, it would have been significantly more. So
yeah, so I'll add that back to the card, Basil. But yeah, give me the over on whatever it is.
Okay. Sounds good to me. The biggest thing that jumps out to me is the Texas pick. I mean, -35. Normally, I would say this is a gross pick. Avoid it at all costs. Not because I don't think it'll hit, but just because I just don't think it's a pick worth picking. I like to, keep things a little bit closer. But Texas versus UTEP, just feels like, just a minor inconvenience for a Longhorns team that has just vastly greater goals on the horizon, right? I mean, this Texas team is we've seen them, the past couple of years. I hate to say this because we've said this on the pod before, and people have been saying it for the past, nearly 2 decades now. But I think it's finally time to put the rest. The question of, is Texas back? Because especially in the current college football landscape that we're in right now, Texas is here. They're back. They are primed to make a big run, and a game against UTEP is just, minuscule compared to, what this team should be striving for. That being said, I mean, they still got to get the win, but yeah, I think this is as easy of a lock as you can go here, Tondo.
You know what is my other lock? Quinn Ewers wearing a fucking Giants jersey in 2025.
Wow.
Let's go.
Wow.
Let's go.
Better him than Shador.
I don't want Shador. That guy's throwing all of his teammates under the bus. Quinn Ewers taking this team to the promised land, bringing Texas back, going number 1 overall pick to the New York Giants, and Archie Manning will then go back-to-back. Book it.
Your trips to Austin have changed you.
Texas is so good. They're back. Like,
I know. I think
they're back.
October 19th is going to be real interesting because it's very rare that you get that high caliber of a matchup that early. Like I feel like it's either week 1 or the last week of the year, regular season, that you get these high caliber matchups, and you get Georgia, Texas, October 19th. I truly do. Right now, I believe Texas is the best football team in the nation. I do have Georgia 1, but it's just because Georgia hasn't done anything to erode
you can't
that.
take
so I do think they're the best.
All right, well, you heard it here first, folks. Quinn Ewers, enjoy your time in Austin while you can, because in a few months you'll have to be a New York Giant. And I wouldn't wish that on a lot of people.
Quinn Ewers and Malik Neighbors would feed families. That would honestly be beautiful.
All right, let's get into my card as I climb atop the Football House pick'em standings. Pretty standard stuff here. I've got UCF -2 versus TCU. I think UCF is going to be they're going to make a splash early on in the Big 12. I really like them to get 2 against a pretty weak TCU team. They have not really been able to recoup the losses that they've had since their college football playoff run. I got Memphis +6.5 versus Florida State. Again, Memphis, this is the best game on their remaining schedule for the rest of the season. Like so many other teams, look, they can make the American playoff. They can make the American Conference Championship game, but in terms of guaranteed games remaining on their schedule for their playoff resume, they have to do well against Florida State. A loss would be fine for me, but I think at least covering within a touchdown would be crucial for their college football playoff resumes, both for them and for the American Conference as a whole. I've got Colorado -7 versus Colorado State. I know what happened last week against Nebraska. I know what almost happened 2 weeks ago against North Dakota State. But like we saw last season, no matter what Colorado has going on, no matter what they can't get together, I still think from a pure talent standpoint, they have, they're kind of blowing Colorado State out of the water. I do not feel like this Rams team is one that can really compete in this year's Mountain West. So I'm going to go Colorado within a touchdown here. Missouri -17. I know, Tondo, you're riding that Boston College bandwagon, but we see it all the time. There's always a team that goes off, the first couple weeks of the season and then is just humbled. As soon as they meet a quality opponent, I feel like that's what's going to happen here with Boston College against Missouri. So I'm taking them -17. And again, just like with Memphis, I think at this point, Missouri has much bigger aspirations than Boston College. This is not a game they want to drop. This is not a game they want to make close. So I'm taking Missouri minus 17. The Apple Cup this week, a crucial matchup on the schedule. RIP, once again, RIP the Pac-12. This would have been a great in-conference game. I think Wazoo has, they have a lot going for them this season. Obviously, even though they're technically still in the Pac-12 or Pac-2, whatever you want to call it, I don't, they really can't do much in terms of a college football playoff bid. I mean, the best they can do is maybe, get some good wins against Mountain West teams, considering this is the last and only year of agreement between the Pac-12 or the Pac-2 and the Mountain West to get some quality games in. But I think Washington, they're trying to remain a top 25 staple. They're trying to possibly make a push in the Big Ten. So I've got them minus 4.5 here. Lafayette are my FCS pick of the week. I've got them getting the win against Marist straight up. I had them going against Buffalo week 1. I thought they'd do well. Reigning Patriot League champs. I was clearly wrong. And, as much as I like to, I feel like some of us on the podcast, myself included, every once in a while, I like to have a spite pick. There's a team that wrongs us in the beginning of the season, and then we like to go against them later on. This is a redemption pick for me. I think Lafayette is going to be able to get an easy win here in hopes of getting, trying to go back-to-back in the Patriot League. In my opinion, I hope Fordham stops them, but I don't really care about, that in relation to this week. And then my lock of the week is Indiana versus UCLA. I've got them minus 3 for the Hoosiers. UCLA has, they're obviously, one of the new players in the Big Ten this year. I don't really feel like their football program has been up to snuff these last couple of years. The travel that the Big Ten requires is, I feel like, going to get to them a little bit, and then that's why I have Indiana at minus 3. So that's my card for the week.
I like your card, Basil. I'm going to not really talk about TCU or Memphis because I took both of these games as well, but I'll get into that a little bit later on. But one thing to point out, Colorado and Colorado State, they had a battle last year. I think Colorado only ended up beating them by a touchdown, 8 points. I think it was 43-35. And that was a shock to everyone. And that was after Colorado came out hot out of the gate and everyone was giving them all this hype. And then Colorado State kind of simmered that down. So it'll be interesting to see this year how they match up against them and if they blow them out this year. I do think after losing against Nebraska last week so big, I think they're going to want to come out and bounce back. So I like that pick. The Missouri-BC game, that was one of my games to watch this week. I mean, we talked about Missouri, how good they are with Brady Cook and Luther Burden, and what damage they could do in the SEC this year. BC, though, is a team, like, if they perform well in this game and somehow keep it close, I mean, we got to start talking about Billy O'Brien a little bit more and what he's doing there, because they've started off very impressive. They got that big win against Florida State a couple weeks ago. They crushed Duquesne last week. I think it was 59-0. And Thomas Castellanos, their quarterback, has been really great and fun to watch. So this is going to be an interesting game to watch. And if BC can keep it close, then, I think we got to start talking about them a little bit more. And then, Washington, I like them against Washington State. They should have named the Pac-12 the Tupac.
I like it.
If only
there are no California teams though, so I feel like that it's a little tough to.
If Colorado was in it, could have been Tupac Shadur.
Oh, that's incredible.
I know.
Wow.
Put some thought of that one. Cole's like writing this down, and at the end of class, like, I'm gonna.
It actually just came to me like in the last 5 minutes, but I had to share.
Love that. I love that.
All right, well, that was great. So let's get into another great card. We've got Jake. Jake, how are you going to redeem yourself this week?
I'm doing
It's
it
like
by
a
volume
grocery
spraying.
list. What is that thing?
It's a laundry list. Yes, exactly. And I understand there's a lot of picks on here, but that is the only way I'm going to get myself out. Like I gotta just see what sticks here. I've done some research and I feel like I'm comfortable. All right, rapid fire. Let's go. Arizona State over Texas State, -1.5. Listen, Arizona State's, I think no one put this on their card just yet, I don't think. Arizona State's 5th in the Big 12 in total offense already, which is nice. They're up to around almost 500 yards a game, scoring offense 39, but they're second in run offense. So they run the ball very well. They've got a freshman quarterback. He scrambles. They've got a really good running back too, as a senior, Cam Scatibo, who is leading the Big 12 in rush yards. Look, this is a momentum play here. I love what Arizona State's been doing. I think they're going to come into Texas State and just knock them off. Right? They're gonna outrun them. They're going to overwhelm their defense. Texas State strung together a couple of nice wins, but I think Arizona State, is just gonna string together a bit more. All right, Buffalo -4 over UMass. This is my who sucks less play. And here's the deal. UMass has lost each of its last 10 games against opponents from the MAC. That's a real bad mark for a team that's going into the MAC next year, first of all. So not great. UMass has also failed to cover the spread in 11 of its last 13 road games in September. Early in the year on the road, they do not do well, right? They do not cover. They typically don't win. God only knows. That's a leading indicator for me. Their only redeeming quality is their quarterback. I don't know if you've watched UMass football this year. I have not. I've watched a little bit of the highlights from the first couple of games. But Tyson Pumashon, playmaking quarterback. He's a run threat. Rushed for over 100 yards this year. But I don't think that's enough to single-handedly beat Buffalo on their home turf here. Right? Buffalo, I think, handles this pretty easily. Apple Cup, similar comments to Basil here. Look, this is Jed Fish's first year at Washington. I call it year zero almost, right? They lost a bunch of guys, but they obviously did well replacing them, I think. They brought in some solid D linemen in the transfer portal. They held Eastern Michigan in week 2 to just 2 yards per carry. My thing with Washington State as a quarterback situation is just a bit weird right now. This was what we were talking about. Former Bryant quarterback Zevi Eckhouse was in the running. John Mateer ultimately won the job there. He isn't great so far, but he can run the football, right? So if Washington State goes up against this Washington Huskies team and they can't run the ball, right? Like I'm fully predicting Washington just shuts him out on the run here. And if Mateer, this quarterback, has to throw a lot, I think this game just greatly favors Washington. So I'm taking the Huskies to cover here, maybe even by a little bit more. Michigan, here's the thing. I think what we learned about Michigan, maybe I renege on what I said a couple weeks ago, where I think they've got a lot to prove. They're a high caliber football team still in that upper echelon. I think they're a good team, but they're not a natty team. Right. They're a team that's not going to be in contention to win the national championship. So, I know Michigan is far from what they were last year, obviously, but I fully believe they're better than some people think they are. Right. Like I'm in the middle of, I'm not ready to write them off. I'm not ready to think they suck. But, they lost to a team last week that I honestly, my thought is they're the best team in the country, as I said. Right. The system under Michigan's new head coach is still growing. They're trying to figure stuff out. I look at Arkansas State on the other hand. They've got a weird card, right? They probably should have lost to Central. They're 2-0, right? Let me preface it with people are saying, oh, Arkansas State, good time to beat Michigan. They probably should have lost to Central Arkansas. That was a 34-31 win. Great. Then they barely beat Tulsa at home, 28-24. This is a bounce back game for Michigan, right? Just shut everybody up. Put the full throttle on. You're back in Ann Arbor. Just do your thing. So I've got Michigan to cover a steep 23.5 there. I'm actually, after some thought, going to take Oklahoma Tulane out of my card. I've seen too much info that favors Tulane here, but I don't want to bet Tulane just yet. So I'm taking that out. For the record, I do not love Oklahoma -13.5. I don't think I'm going to bet the reverse, but I'm taking it out. Missouri, BC, I won't repeat what's already been said, but look, the spread should look familiar to BC fans from 2 weeks ago, right, where they beat Florida State. They were 16.5-point underdogs, basically. I love what Castellanos has been doing this year, Cole, to your point. He's got a really good situation going on at BC. He's a dual threat. He can run, he can throw. He had a lot of people high on him last year too, but he just had a real crappy team around him. But I think this defense is another beast. I just think this Missouri defense is, they haven't allowed, what's the stat here? They rank first in FBS total defense here, basically, right? Like, they haven't allowed a single point at this point of the season. They're 8-1 against the spread in the last 9 games. Brady Cook's going to hit 7,000 yards this game. He's only 66 yards away. He's got a lot of playmakers around him. I really do think this team's in the top 10. I think they're going to be right in the top of the CFP when this is all over. So give me Missouri to cover here, or to beat or to cover that 17-point spread. FIU. FAU's on the shit list for me, but more importantly, FIU throttled Central Michigan 52-16. FIU racked up 5 interceptions in 2 games already, right? This is not the same FIU team that nearly lost to Bryant last year, right? This is a good FIU team. Meanwhile, FAU's on a 6-game losing streak since last year. They lost to Army, which was a bad loss. Michigan State, they are what they are. They've got a decent team every year. The FAU offense isn't producing. FIU defense is cooking. For me, that's an easy choice. They cover this one. They beat the +5. And then Eastern Michigan against Jacksonville State. Look, Jacksonville State has they've got smoked defensively in 2 games in a row. I don't think they go on the road and somehow figure this stuff out, right? Eastern Michigan's 2-0 against the spread this year. Jacksonville State's 0-2. Eastern Michigan should feel a little better because they've held their own in these first couple of games. First game at home, I take them here. I'll skip the game of the week, of course. My FCS is going to be Georgetown against Sacred Heart. This game was not close last year. It was 27-10 final. It was 24-10 at halftime. Long as Georgetown does it again, they'll be fine. Georgetown wins by an average of 22 points on the year. They beat Davidson. They beat Marist. Again, they're not top quality wins, but they're good wins. And then my deal on Kansas here against UNLV. You got to stop the run in this game. That's the key to UNLV, Tondo, because everybody's tricked out against, they look at UNLV's metrics and they say, wow, holy shit, they can run the football. They've got 2 really good quarterbacks. Matt Sluka, who everyone should remember in the Northeast, was at Holy Cross. He transfers to UNLV. Haj Malik Williams, who I've mentioned week 1 of this show, he went from Campbell as a dual threat quarterback to UNLV. They battled it out in every sense of the word in this quarterback competition. So what does the UNLV coach do? He says, great, Sluka's going to start, but Haj Malik Williams will come in until he'll contribute. Well, Haj Malik Williams is now the 4th-ranked rushing player on UNLV, right? The kid can run. They put him in at halftime of this other game, and he's running the ball all over the place. Sluka leads the team as the quarterback with 129 rushing yards. Meanwhile, similar to what I said before about FIU's defense and all these good run defenses, same with Washington, Kansas is pretty good on the run D, right? So that's why it's a tantalizing cover for UNLV. It's at +7, Kansas coming on an off day, UNLV really cooking. I think they put up 70 points a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was last week. I just think that this is not a great matchup for them, right? Kansas has only allowed 150 rushing yards, basically. They've only allowed 1 touchdown on the ground. I don't know. I think if you make them throw the football, they're screwed. They've been on the field for not a lot of plays. It's 117. They're surrendering 13 points a game, Kansas. I like this for Kansas. I appreciate the folks that are recognizing that UNLV is a good football team. I just don't love the matchup for him here. So that's the card here. Hopefully we didn't lose any viewers in the 10 or 15 minutes I took reading my laundry list. But
I do like Kansas because I think, especially after last week losing to Illinois, Jalen Daniels played like crap. Threw multiple picks. They just did not look good. I think they bounced back against UNLV, so I like that lock.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I really liked about your card is Oklahoma. One thing that we've talked about pretty much this entire time, doing the football house so far this season is Texas, right? They come into the SEC, they're immediately on a national championship push. It's natty or bust for them this year. But I think we are kind of underwriting the presence of Oklahoma in the SEC. Obviously the biggest rivalry out of the Big 12 coming into the SEC, challenging already some of the other big rivalries that we've got in the Southeastern Conference, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi State versus Ole Miss. And now we've got the Red River rivalry. How much do you feel like Oklahoma could make a push for the college football playoff? And also, how much do you feel like this year's Texas-Oklahoma game will set the tone for either team's, chances at an SEC title?
You're gonna talk me into putting Oklahoma back in the card, right? Because I took this. This is the one that I took off, and now you're gonna talk me back into putting it here. I don't know. I'm conflicted, Basil. I'm conflicted. I think Oklahoma's a good football team. I think they've responded well from their many losses to the portal. Did they win this game? Yes. Did they do it 13.5 against Tulane? That's just what I'm not certain on. I do think Oklahoma's got a line of sight to be right there in the SEC championship. But man, I just don't know. This conflicts me so much.
Yeah, I'm on the opposite end. I don't think Oklahoma's a bad team, but I just think with all the other teams in the SEC this year, I don't think they're making a push. I think they're going to get blown out by Texas during the Red River rivalry. I think just Texas is a way better team. Look, Oklahoma lost their starting quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, to Oregon, right? So that's not easy. You kind of have to reset there. Still a great team, still have a lot of talent. Great coach, Brent Venables. Great coach. He coached at Clemson under Dabo back in the day. I just don't think there's enough there this year for them to make any noise.
Prime
Absolutely.
Baker Mayfield would have loved the SEC. Going back in time. I think they're just not. They're not strong enough in the conference right now.
Absolutely.
How's their new quarterback doing? Oklahoma, is he stringing it together? Because I know there was
Jackson Arnold.
Yeah.
I don't know how I honestly haven't really looked into them much. They've put up a lot of points, but I think they played Temple and Houston are the two teams they've played, I believe. They're putting up a lot of points, but again, they haven't run into any legit opponents yet, within the SEC. So until they come up with a big win against a team like Missouri or LSU or Ole Miss or one of those teams, I'm not rolling with them.
Yeah, why I don't love this is Tulane has been a total covering machine, as we know very well on the show for the last year, and they're well off to another good start in that department here. So, I don't know, telling game for sure, but this is going to be struck from the Zimmer card here.
Absolutely, and then finally we've got Cole, your card. Break it down for us.
Yeah, so I'm rolling with Zimmer on Arizona State -1.5 versus Texas State. Look, I don't think Texas State is a bad team. Arizona State, though, big win last week against Mississippi State, won 30-23 against an SEC team. It's pretty good. Like Zimmer mentioned, they got a nice young quarterback, Sam Leavitt. He's a dual threat, ran for a couple touchdowns last week. Their running back, Cam Scabito, 262 rushing yards in one game last week. He's averaging over 6.2 yards per carry. So I like what their offense is doing. Now, Texas State, they also have a pretty good offense with QB Jordan McLeod. He's shown that he's athletic. His favorite targets have been Kriston Jr. and Joey Hobart. But I think if Arizona State's defense can shut them down, I like Arizona State to go on the road and get that win. Arizona State also right now does have the most defensive touchdowns in the FBS with 3 defensive touchdowns, 2 fumble recoveries, and 1 pick six. So their defense has been flying around, making plays. So I'll take the Sun Devils there. And I believe that game is tomorrow night. So we'll get to see that early in the week. Moving over to Memphis, Florida State. We've talked a little bit about this. Memphis, They're averaging 39 points per game, putting up a lot of points. Their defense is 10th in the country in turnover margin. They currently have a turnover ratio of +4. So they're making other teams turn the ball over. And as we know, FSU has had a lot of issues on offense. That's been kind of the nucleus of where their problems are. It's interesting because Florida State had a week off last week after the loss to BU or BC. They don't even have a football program.
Exactly. I was going to say, something I don't.
After they lost to BC, so that's going to be interesting, right? How do they bounce back after that week? Did they make the necessary changes in their bye week, or are they going to continue to struggle against Memphis in their defense? Look, Memphis is a good team. They were 10-3 last year, and they were 5-0 on the road. And Florida State has already lost to BC at home. So I wouldn't put it past the Memphis Tigers to go in and get this win. Another factor that is in this game is that Mike Norvell, the head coach of Florida State, used to be the head coach at Memphis. He left Memphis to go to Florida State. I mean, he did a great job with that program, lifted them up, and then took a better job. Can't blame the guy. He's done a great job at Florida State, not this year, but overall. But the head coach now at Memphis, Ryan Silverfield, he was an O-line coach under Mike Norvell, so he knows him pretty well. There's probably people in that program or that are associated with the program that aren't happy that Norvell left and took off to go to greener pastures. So I think there's a little more for it in this game for Memphis, and I just wouldn't be surprised if they cover. So I'm going to take them. Florida and A&M. So if you had asked me after week one, I would have been like, A&M's going to win this game, no problem. Florida looks terrible. The way that they came out against Miami in week one, they were embarrassed. I think that has to do more with Miami than it does Florida. I think their issue right now down in Gainesville is they kind of have a quarterback controversy going on. They got two quarterbacks, Graham Mertz, and then the true freshman, I believe, DJ Lagway, who played last week against Samford, lit it up, did unbelievable. So Billy Napier is going to have to pick. He said he's going to use both of them going forward, but I think you got to go Lagway. He's the hot hand. He's the young kid, throws a little bit of flash in there. But look, the reason I'm taking the Gators, one, they're at home, and Gainesville, the Swamp, is not an easy place to play, right? A&M still hasn't convinced me that they've gotten over the hump, right, to be one of those premier teams. I still think they're going to have struggles this year with Mike Elko. And Florida realistically needs this game badly, because if they don't win this game, they already have the loss to Miami, which isn't a conference loss, so it's not the end of the world, but it's still a loss, right? But if they lose against A&M, they still have to play against 7th-ranked Tennessee. They have to play, and that's at Tennessee. They got to play Georgia. They're playing Georgia at home, but they're the number one team in the country. They have to go to Texas, which is the number 2 team. So you're playing the 1, the 2, the 7, and then you have LSU and Ole Miss also in your schedule. And then sprinkled in between those games, Kentucky, Florida State, and UCF. That is not an easy schedule for the Gators by any means, and they're probably not going to be favored in the majority of those games. So if you could pick up a win here against the Aggies at home, I feel like you have to. This is your opportunity, so you got nothing to lose. So I'm going to take the Gators +4. Ole Miss versus Wake Forest. I mean, it's pretty simple. I've been rolling with Ole Miss the entire season. I'm not going to stop picking them yet because Jackson Dart is just unbelievable. He, through 2 games, I think he's almost up to 800 yards. Pretty sure he's got the most passing yards in FBS right now, and he's a serious Heisman contender. Like I said, I think Ole Miss took a really big step forward this year with the guys they brought in. I think they're going to compete. Zimmer loves Missouri. I'm more of Ole Miss. I think that they have a better chance to last against Texas or Georgia or those teams, and I think that they're going to get into the playoffs. So I expect them to win big against Wake Forest, who hasn't really done much this year. So I'm going to take them. And then TCU plus UCF. I know, Basil, you're taking UCF. The only reason I'm taking TCU here, once again, they're at home, so I like that. And just looking at these two quarterbacks, the comparisons, you have Josh Hoover for TCU, who's a sophomore, and then KJ Jefferson, who's bounced around, been to a bunch of different schools. He's the quarterback for UCF. So far, looking at their stats, comparing them, Josh Hoover's played way better than KJ Jefferson. So I like TCU. It might be a shootout, might be a lot of scoring back and forth, but I think Josh Hoover can do a better job moving the ball down the field and making big plays with his arm. And then also TCU, I know we talked about how they were in the national championship. Last year, they kind of fell apart, lost a lot of the pieces that were part of that national championship team, even though they got destroyed by Georgia in the national championship. But I think this is a reset year. I think they're going to bounce back. They brought in over 20 transfers in the portal, which I found out today, and that's a lot, right? So that makes a big impact. I think TCU has a bounce back year this year, and I think that they could be a factor in the Big 12. So I'm going to take TCU +2 at home. FCS, I'm taking Maine Black Bears over Monmouth. Monmouth, through their first two games, they've played Lafayette and Eastern Washington. They've let up more than 40 points in each one of those games. I think Maine is just a better team. I think they're going to be able to put a lot of points on Monmouth, and I don't think that they'll be able to beat them. So I'm going to take the Maine Black Bears there. And then the lock of the week, Oregon versus Oregon State, which used to be known as the Civil War. That's what it used to be called. So interesting little fun fact. Taking the over at 50.5. We've talked a little bit about Oregon. They've struggled a little bit out of the gate, or not struggled, but they haven't been as good or as explosive as we thought they were going to be, especially with getting Dylan Gabriel. That first week they played at Idaho. Didn't really impress me much there. Last week they had the tight game against Boise State. So I don't know. I just think both these teams are averaging about 30 points a game, and both their offenses are averaging over 400 yards a game. So there's a potential there for it to be a back and forth type game. I think both their quarterbacks are transfer quarterbacks. You have Dylan Gabriel coming from Oklahoma to Oregon, and then you have Giovanni McCoy, who was at Idaho. He's not now at Oregon State. So I still think that they're learning their offenses, getting used to being on these new teams. Like we've said in the past, that takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. Learning a whole new playbook and schemes and all that. So, now you're into week 3. You should be getting it at this point. Things should be coming pretty more smoothly. So hopefully this is a high-scoring game. I think that should hit 50.5. So I'm going to take the over there for my lock.
That is a fantastic card. I love Maine money line. We don't really show a lot of love to the Bears too much here, but overall, I think really solid. A great way to get kind of up the hill, over the hill from 8-8 into a winning record. And let's get into our game of the week, guys. We've got a really great matchup here. One that we have not really talked about. Two teams that we have not really talked about a lot in terms of game of the week, but two teams that I think could have a really big impact on their conference going forward. In their first year as conference, compatriots here, Arizona versus Kansas State. Right now, the line is at 7.5 in favor of Kansas State. But I think we've got a pretty mixed bag in terms of picks here. So let's go through, how everyone feels like this game is going to go. Starting off with you, Jake.
It puzzles me. And I thought about this for a while. Here's where I land. I think Arizona plays into Kansas State's weaknesses offensively, right? Like, I think, I don't know. Arizona's defense has been pretty decent, but ultimately it comes out to a shootout. K-State running the football will win them the game. I really do. I think Kansas State's going to win this football game, right? They've been running the football really well. But I think, Arizona's just high-powered offense here is going to keep them in it for long enough. It's not enough to outlast K-State, but That's my thought here. That's generally how I think this goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Two high-quality quarterbacks in this conference heading into this game from both schools. Cole, who do you feel like, which quarterback do you feel like flashes more talent in this game?
That's a good question. I think they've both showed signs of, greatness, and then they both have had games where they haven't looked so great. I like Arizona in this game, and I'll break it down why, but especially just because watching Kansas State last week, I took them, I believe, to beat Tulane, and I watched that entire game, and just watching that game and seeing how Arizona has played, I think that Arizona might win this game. I think this is their first matchup since 1978. So it's been a long time since these two schools have played each other. Arizona's 5-1-1 all time, which is kind of surprising because Kansas State has always been a good program. I mean, even back in the days of Bill Snyder being their head coach, I mean, they were always a powerhouse, right? So kind of surprising that Arizona has that great of a record against them. Their stud receiver, Titaroa McMillan, his first week numbers were incredible against University of New Mexico. 10 receptions, 304 receiving yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns. I mean, that's unbelievable, right? Those are video game numbers, right? But week 2 against Northern Arizona, he had almost no production. 2 catches, 11 yards, no touchdowns. So he went from one extreme to the next. I think they got to get him involved. Obviously, he's their star player, and Noah Fafita, their quarterback, has to find him to make plays against Kansas State. But Arizona is sneakily on a 9-game winning streak spanning into last season. So, they've been pretty good, and not a lot of people have been talking about them. They beat a lot of ranked teams last year. They beat Washington State, Oregon State, UCLA, Utah. I mean, these are all pretty good teams, right, that we're talking about. They beat Oklahoma in their bowl game. I mean, granted, a lot of guys leave, don't play, but it's still Oklahoma, right? 12th ranked Oklahoma at the time, and you beat them. That's pretty impressive. So they've won 9 in a row. Their only losses were to Washington last year, who went to the national championship, Mississippi State, which is a good SEC team, and then USC in overtime. I think it was like triple overtime. They lost a heartbreaker. So this is a good team, right? That, and then, like I said, watching Kansas State last week against Tulane, I mean, Darian Menza, the quarterback for Tulane, was lighting their defensive backs up. Like on play action plays, throwing downfield, they looked like Swiss cheese. They could not stop the throw down the field, and it almost hurt them. I mean, they were down Kansas State by 10 points at halftime. They ended up coming back to win because their defense made plays when they needed to up front. Their D-line and their linebackers. Menza, really excited to watch him in the future for Tulane, but kind of tried to extend a play, made an error, ended up coughing up the ball. Kansas State took it to the house, ran it back, and that gave them the lead for them to win the game. But their defense did not look great. They are a well-coached team with Chris Kleiman being the head coach. So I think it'll be a close game, but it's going to be a matter, like Jake said, I think, of the run game. DJ Giddens, their running back, he's a beast. He ran for a lot of yards last week, and Avery Johnson, their quarterback, is athletic and can make plays, but it's really going to come down to can Kansas State's defensive backs stop these receivers, and Titaroa McMillan for Arizona. I don't know if they're going to be able to, so I like Arizona in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Tondo.
No, I agree with
stop those receivers.
No, I mean, I was pulling up the stats from last week's Tulane game, and they had 2 receivers that one hit 128 and the other one hit 97, 2 100-yard receivers for, Mensa's 342 yards in the air, not to mention their lead running back, Mekhi Hughes, rushed for 128 yards and 21 carries. So it's like, if Tulane's doing that against Kansas State, I can see Arizona easily matching those numbers, let alone exceeding them. Now, do I think that they can win this game? No. Well, I don't want to say no, but I'm not putting that on my card. So that's why I took the 7.5. I think they cover that easily.
Yeah, that was the same with me. I mean, I was confident that Arizona was going to cover. I mean, I definitely think they can win, but I wasn't confident enough to give them the money line. I still think Kansas State, like I said, great team, well coached, have a lot of talent. And if they can get it together and stop Arizona's defense, then I think they'll win the game. But I think it's going to be really close.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm going Arizona to cover as well, but I think Kansas State is going to get this. It's going to be an air battle, but I just think Avery Johnson is just that much better. That's pretty much it for this week, guys. It's going to be a pretty solid week. I think our cards look pretty good. If you have to ask me. Any other thoughts? Any other games on your guys' radar that you feel like people should check out?
I think LSU, South Carolina, that's going to be a fun one to watch. Alabama, Wisconsin. Does Alabama blow them out, or does Wisconsin keep it close? And then the BC Missouri game. How that pans out. Those are my top games to watch this week.
Absolutely.
I want to see how Notre Dame ends up against Purdue. I want to see. It's a 10-point spread. So let's see how Notre Dame responds here.
Yeah, they need it badly too. And one thing that we didn't mention, another important game, especially for our pod, backyard brawl, baby, West Virginia and Pitt.
Oh shit, that's this week.
Damn.
Oh, I gotta make a pick.
Surprised that wasn't our. Damn.
I feel like giving Arizona and Kansas State the game of the week is really fun, though. They're two teams that I don't think we've talked about. Two teams that are really interesting.
Now I'm really sad, guys. I wanted to.
Oh, Jake. Oh.
I know. What am I going to do? Do I risk the pick and adding one more to my laundry list of cards?
Get rid of Oklahoma and put it on the backyard.
Yeah, maybe I just swap them out. Man. Wow, only a 2-point spread for West Virginia, too. I
like Pitt, too. I think Pitt wins.
Wow, really?
Yep.
Oh, man. Cole.
It's going to be tough. But, regardless, we're here through every weekend of college football, every weekend on houseenterprise.com of NFL football as well. We've got a lot of great NFL content on the way. Got a lot of college basketball content coming up for you guys. So as you can see on the bottom ticker here, make sure you follow House Enterprise on all of the social media platforms listed below. If you don't have an account on, any of these platforms, make one so you can follow House Enterprise and get updates on everything you need to know about college football, college basketball, the NFL, and much, much more. So that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode of the Football House. Make sure you check back here next week to see how we did, as well as picks for week 4. It's crazy how, this season is just chugging along. But until then, for Will Tondo, Jake Zimmer, Cole Hughes, I'm Sam Basil. This has been the Football House, and we'll see you guys next time.